of Pretoria, a boy once looked up at the stars, not as distant light, but as destinations. His name was Elon Musk, a child with questions too big for the world around him and a silence that spoke louder than words. He wasn't the strongest nor the most popular, but within him burned something far greater, an unrelenting belief that the impossible was merely waiting for someone brave enough to try. He faced isolation, doubt and pain, the kind that carves strength into the soul, while others dreamed within the bounds of gravity. Elon dreamed beyond it. He devoured books like lifelines, built worlds inside his imagination, and saw in every failure not a defeat, but an equation to be solved. As he grew, so did his vision, vast, untamed, and relentless. From the dusty garages of early startups to the roaring flames of rocket tearing through the sky, Elon Musk became not just an innovator, but a symbol of what it means to believe in the future even when the present refuses to. This is not a story about wealth or power. It's the story of a man who dared to rewrite the definition of human potential, who faced ridicule, exhaustion and loss, yet never let go of the stars that called his name. This is the story of Elon Musk, the man who refused to look down when the universe invited him to look up. Elon Musk was born on June 28, 1971 in Pretoria, South Africa. Pretoria was a city that lived beneath an enormous blue dome of sky, where jacaranda trees would burst into spring, into violet blossoms, blanketing the streets like soft carpet. The climate was dry and the sunlight sharp, the air carrying the song of cicadas in summer and the softer hush of winter evenings. It was a city where history was heavy, the laws of apartheid pressing against daily life, and yet also a city where a boy could find commerce of escape, places to read, to dream, to imagine. From the earliest days, Elon Musk showed a mind turned inward toward thought. He read with a hunger that seemed to come from somewhere beyond him. Encyclopedias, novels, manuals, he devoured them in long sittings, page after page, as if every word added another brick to the shelter he built inside himself. Where other children carried toys, he carried volumes, his arms full of books that opened into distant worlds. At home, the rhythm of life was ordinary. The clatter of dishes, his mother's movement between kitchen and table, his father's clipped words when present, the faint static of a radio left on in the background. In the middle of this domestic music, the boy sat with a book or scribbled notes, his mind lifted far away from the small house in Pretoria. He dreamed of galaxies, of machines, of possibilities that could not be seen from the porch. At school, he was often a target. Small, quiet, bookish, he was bullied, sometimes violently. More than once he fell under the fist and boot of other boys, left bloodied and bruised. But hardship has a way of forging persistence. He learned early the art of standing again, of returning to class, of continuing despite the ache. The world outside was rough, but inside, his imagination remained intact, untouched by cruelty. At the age of 10, Elon received his first computer, a Commodore VIC-20. Its plastic case was beige, its keys clacked loudly, and its screen glowed faintly green in the dark. To many, it was a novelty. To him, it was a portal. He sat for hours at the keyboard, typing line after line of code from a manual, eyes straining in the low light. He studied the logic, corrected his mistakes, and learned how to bend the machine to his will. At 12, he created a simple game, Blaster, and sold it for a modest sum. The money was not important. What mattered was the certainty that imagination could be translated into something others could touch. Pretoria, in those days, was both a cage and a classroom. The system of apartheid divided, controlled, and confined, but it also underscored for Elon Musk the importance of breaking boundaries, of resisting the idea that limit must remain. He absorbed this lesson not in speeches, but in the quiet determination of his reading and coding. A boy who had been beaten at school now found refuge in circuits and screens, building a future that stretched beyond the horizon of his youth. By the time he was 17, Elon had made his decision. Military service loomed, and with it, the demand to support a system he could not embrace. He chose instead to leave. The decision was both practical and visionary. Practical because Canada offered him a passport through his mother's heritage. Visionary because he believed that his future lay in North America, where technology and ambition were rising together. He traveled first to Canada. The flight itself was a symbol, leaving behind the heavy air of Pretoria for the crisp, cool skies of a different world. He arrived with little money, carrying only determination and a plan to begin again. His first jobs were small, farm labor, odd shifts, work that left him sore and weary but gave him enough to keep moving forward. Ordinary work has a way of teaching extraordinary patience, and Elon absorbed its lessons silently. He enrolled at Queen's University in Ontario. The campus was alive with energy, conversations spilling from classrooms, the buzz of ideas carried across courtyards, students running late with books clutched to their sides. Elon listened more than he spoke. He observed the ambition in others, tested the shape of his own, and learned how ideas could be sharpened in discussion. After 2 years, he transferred to the University of Pennsylvania, where he studied physics and economics, a pairing that reflected his dual fascination with how the universe worked and how people built their systems of exchange. He lived modestly, sharing apartments that were cramped and sometimes crumbling. Paint peeled, stoves caulked, windows stuck in their frames. But within those rooms lived conversations that lasted until dawn. He and his friends debated the future, drawing on walls and notebooks, imagining companies not yet built and worlds not yet reached. In those late nights, a habit was formed to think in terms not only of what was, but of what might be. Every dream began as a sketch on a borrowed page. The mid-1990s was the dawn of the internet age, and the world was only just waking to its power. Offices basked with the glow of CRT monitors. Their screens warmed to the touch. Dial-up modems shrieked and sang as they pulled fragile connections across copper wires. The air smelled of cardboard boxes, coffee, and heated electronics. The future felt near, if only someone could grasp it. Elon and his brother Kimball co-founded Zip2, a company that aimed to put maps and business directories online. Their office was small, their furniture second-hand, their energy endless. They slept on couches, showered at the YMCA, and lived on cheap meals. Nights dissolved into mornings as code flowed onto screens. Elon worked relentlessly, often through the night, his eyes fixed on the logic of his programs. Investors were skeptical, newspapers hesitant, but persistence in a quiet force. It builds slowly until the walls give way. Eventually, Zip2 gained traction when the company was sold for nearly $300 million. Elon received his first real fortune. He did not rest. With his share, he founded X.com, a company with a bold idea to move money seamlessly over the internet. At the time, the notion was radical. Transactions were slow, checks still traveled in envelopes, and banks were cautious. X.com struggled, but pressing on, merging, shifting, and finally emerging as PayPal. The company's offices were chaotic, filled with argument, brick throws, and the smell of pizza consumed at 2 a.m. Elon clashed with colleagues, pushed hard for innovation, and refused to retreat. In 2002, eBay acquired PayPal for $1.5 billion. Elon's share made him wealthy beyond measure. Yet wealth was never the destination, only the mean to reach the larger vision he carried since boyhood. In 2004, Elon turned his attention to Tesla, a small startup determined to prove that electric cars could be more than novelties. At the time, electric vehicles were mocked as slow, impractical, and plain. Elon believed differently. He saw a future in which sleek, fast, efficient cars ran on electricity, liberating humanity from dependence on fossil fuels. The early years were a crucible. Prototypes failed, investors doubted, fans dwindled. Tesla came close to collapse more than once. Yet, Elon pressed on. He poured in his own money, stood in factories with grease on his hands, and slept on production floors. He believed that leadership required prisons, and he lived by that belief. Slowly, Tesla produced the Roadster, a car that was fast, elegant, and electric. It changed minds. Then came the Model S, a sedan that drew praise for its own speed, design, and range. Critics who once scoffed began to listen. The Model X followed, with its distinctive falcon wing doors, and the Model 3 brought affordability to the vision. Across highways, the sound of engines began to share space with the quiet hum of electric motors. supercharger stations spread like white sentinels along roadsides, allowing long journeys with the reassurance of power waiting ahead. Even before Tesla, Elon had founded SpaceX in 2002, driven by the vision of making humanity a multiplanetary species. To most, it sounded like fantasy. Rockets were the domain of government, expensive and fragile. But Elon believed they could be cheaper, flown more often, and most radically reused. The early attempts were painful. Falcon 1 failed once, then twice, then a third time. Each launch consumed money and hope. Critics declared the company doomed. But Elon persevered. He invested his own fortune, risking ruin. In 2002, Falcon 1 finally reached orbit. It was a modest rocket, but it represented something enormous. The breaking of a barrier. SpaceX had proven itself. From there, the company grew. The Falcon 9 became its mainstay, carrying satellites, supplies, and eventually astronauts. The Dragon capsule docked with the International Space Station, marking a milestone for private space flight. Most revolutionary of all, SpaceX mastered the art of landing rocket upright. Once thought impossible, boosters returned from flame and fury to touch down gently on ocean bogs or landing pads, ready to fly again. The world watched in awe as fire became precision. At Cape Canaveral and Vandenberg, dawn often found rockets standing tall, their surfaces beaded with frost, steam curling from their tanks. Birds wheeled overhead, and crowds gathered in hushed anticipation. The countdown ticked, engines thundered, and the ground shook as flames lifted steel skyward. In those moments, possibility itself seemed to rise. Starlink extended this reach further, launching strings of satellites that crossed the night sky like pearls on invisible threads. In remote villages, in desert, in ships at sea, dishes pointed upward and drew down the world. Where once there had been silence, now there was connection. SpaceX became not only a company but a symbol, proof that vision matched with persistence could bend the future closer. Elon still spoke of Mars, its red suns, thin skies, and horizons wide as imagination. For him, the rockets on Earth were practice, steps on the staircase to another planet. He believed humanity must spread outward to secure its future, to chase its curiosity, to carry its light into the dark. Beyond cars and rockets, Elon's ventures sprawled into new territories. Solar cities spread panels across rooftops, turning sunlight into electricity. The Boring Company dug tunnels, imagining cities relieved of congestion by underground paths. Neuralink explored the frontier between brain and machine, envisioning treatment for disease and the augmentation of human thought. Each project came with hurdles, skeptics, and slow progress, but each was born from the same refusal to accept that limits were final. Starlink itself grew into one of the largest satellite constellations in history. People across the world, in desert and mountains, on seas and plains, found themselves connected through its threads of light. Villages once cut off from information now streamed lessons, news and stories. Farmers checked weather in real time. Children opened books that glowed with pixels. Voices traveled across the globe at the speed of thought. A sky that once only looked down now answered back. For all his ventures, Elon Musk was still a man, complex and flawed. He worked punishing hours, often sleeping at factories. He read science fiction late into the night, draw inspiration from the futures others had imagined, and sometimes shared impulsive thought with the world through social media. His family life was complex, his relationships shifting, his role as a father woven among his other identities. He laughed easily at times, bristled at criticism, and carried a relentlessness that rarely allowed peace. Contradictions defined him, brilliance and error, determination and exhaustion, vision and vulnerability. To admire him or to doubt him was easy. To understand him fully was difficult. Yet his humanity was undeniable. Even those who dream of Mars must still navigate the fragile ground of ordinary life. Colleagues described him as relentless, demanding more than seemed possible, pushing schedules past breaking, expecting the same of others as he did of himself. Employees told stories of his sudden appearances on factory floors at midnight. His sharp questions, his quick judgment. He could inspire and overwhelm, lift spirit and crush them, often in the same day. To work with him was to be tested. To follow him was to believe that the impossible might not stay impossible for long. At home, he was both distant and tender, sometimes immersed in work, sometimes absorbed in his children's laughter. His personal life was filled with change, marriages and separations, joys and sorrows. Fame made privacy scarce, and wealth made simplicity elusive. Yet in small ways, he remained the boy from Pretoria, curious, restless, and searching. The years advanced and Elon's companies grew larger, more influential. Tesla became a global force, reshaping the auto industry. SpaceX launched astronauts into orbit, laid the foundation for future exploration, and pursued the dream of Mars. Starlink spread across the skies, connecting the disconnected. Solar panels glinted on rooftops. Tunnels stretched beneath Earth, and Neuralink continued its quiet research. From a boy in Pretoria, beaten but unbroken, to a man whose machines touched the stars, Elon Musk's journey was extraordinary. It was built not only of genius, but of persistence, of nights coding alone, of failures endured, of risks embraced. The story remains unfinished. The future he imagines still lies ahead, waiting. The road ahead for Musk is one still paved with uncertainty. Tesla continues to face competition, regulation, and the challenge of producing at scale. SpaceX eyes Mars, but the distance is vast, the obstacles many. Neuralink and the Boring Company straddle the line between promise and speculation. Yet for all the doubt he continues, To some he is reckless, to others a visionary, to most a symbol of ambition that will not settle. He speaks often of humanity's need to become multiplanetary, to secure survival by spreading beyond Earth. He envisions colonies on Mars, domes against the dust, greenhouses beneath alien skies. He imagines tunnels reshaping cities, energy drawn clean from sun and wind, networks linking every human voice. Whether these visions will all come true is unknown, but what is certain is that Elon Musk will continue to try. The lesson his life whispers is simple. Great journeys begin quietly, with a book in a boy's hands, with code typed on a glowing screen, with a decision to step onto a plane. The future is not given, it is built. One choice, one risk, one restless night at a time. And so, the boy from South Africa stands today not as a man who conquered the world, but as one who challenged it to dream bigger. Elon Musk's journey is not perfect. It's raw, chaotic, and human. It's a reminder that greatness is not born from certainty, but from courage, from the willingness to walk alone, to fail publicly, and to rise again with the same fire that once lit the eyes of a child staring at the night sky. He taught us that innovation is not reserved for the few. It's a choice, a decision to act when others hesitate, whether building electric cars, launching rockets, or imagining life on stars. His vision is not only about technology, it's about faith in humanity's boundless capacity to rise above its limits. Elon Musk's story is not finished, because the future he dreams of is still being written. One spark, one idea, one leap at a time. And maybe that's the greatest lesson of all, that within every one of us lives the same spark that looked at the stars and whispered, "Why not?"